Welcome to Puzzling Company, your home for at-home puzzles and mysteries. Here are your hosts, Jared and Zach.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Puzzling Company. It is the reigning champion of competition games, Zach here, and with me is someone who's going to probably try to argue that I cheated or some crap, right? But I have the loser himself, Jared, on. Jared, how are you feeling? Yeah? I mean, that's how I'd feel if I lost.
I just have so many thoughts.
Yeah? You want to say them?
First of all, I want to say congratulations to you.
Thank you. I mean, we both knew that I was going to win this.
I mean, I did predict that.
You did, yes. I did predict that I would also beat you. That was great.
That is, maybe I was more of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Maybe I should have had more confidence in my own abilities.
Here's the thing. You did better than I expected. I thought I would just, in the first Avengers, in Infinity War, I thought I was just going to Thanos snap you off. But you fought back and gave me a good challenge. But to give people an idea of what we're actually talking about, in our last episode, we talked about the game that we would be talking about this week, which is Deckscape's Crew versus Crew, which is a competitive game from Deckscape.
It really is great. I losing is not fun by any stretch of the imagination, and I do not like to lose.
Oh, I know.
But apart from that, I feel like hearing from the loser that this is a really great game should speak volumes about the game.
It's true. I think we both felt this when we played it at the time. Either if we won or lost, the game was it was like a fun, there's a lot, we'll talk about it, but it was fun the entire time. Like
it was.
Even if I would have lost, I think it was a blast. It was probably one of my favorite competition games I've played in a long time.
It was really good, and we're going to dive right into that. Hang with us. Hey, Zach.
Jared, I'm not falling for this again.
Oh, so what? Now you don't trust me?
Correct. I don't trust you.
Well, then do I have a game for you?
What are you talking about?
Floor 13 from CU Adventures. It's the story of a company with too much trust.
But I don't trust you.
Well, Zach, trust me on this. You need to head on over to cuadventures.com and play Floor 13 or their other game, The Lost Temple, and you will not be disappointed.
Wow, that was a great ad. I mean, hearing myself, in it was so great. Dude, like hearing yourself just be the champion all the time is just like a great thing. Jared doesn't know this, I'm making a trophy for myself to give to me to show that I am the champion. And then maybe next time we play a competition game, Jared might have a chance of getting it.
I don't know if you're higher on this game or your ego right now.
My ego is so huge, I don't think anyone could even, Mojo Jojo from...
Yes.
Okay, that's how big my brain is currently. Anyways... but welcome back, guys. We are in our first segment where we're going to talk about the things that we loved or liked about this game, as well as things that we thought could have some room for improvements. So I'm going to get us started with the things that we liked about this game.
Sure.
So the first thing I'm going to say is the competitive aspect of the game. So what I mean by that is just that, the aspect of it, not like the gameplay or anything like that, but why competitive games can be a blast.
And it was so much fun.
Yes. One of the things that everyone loves, there are people who don't like competition, but being able to have a competitive aspect in a game that is done well is a blast because it gives you enough of a challenge where you feel like you yourself are competing against yourself mentally, but then also having someone else that you get to go against and kind of chit-chat or banter against each other to see who's going to be better is just a good time. And when they can facilitate it in the game well to where you feel like the entire time it's competitive enough. Because I think one of the things this game does well is it is competitive, but in a fun way. It never feels like there's a point where it's so competitive that you get frustrated and are upset because it is competitive, And I think one of the things that kind of feeds in that, for at least for us, is that it was a good game. Like the game was fun, but also we both did well in our own degrees.
Yes, it was competitive. It was
close.
Competitive.
Yeah,
it was a close game.
It was to tell you the score, and we won't tell you much about the full scoring system. We might talk about it a little bit later. How the game played out for us is that the final puzzle was the deciding factor.
Yes.
At the end of the day, which was nice. Which when we talk about it more later, it'll make more sense why we were so happy about that. But yeah, I mean, the competitive aspect was just great. There was never a point in this game that I felt like it was too much or that I was getting frustrated with like potentially losing. There's not much at stake. It's just you and your friends or whoever you decide to play with, seeing who does better in the crew versus crew.
And the thing that I really liked about it is, one, we don't see any of this type of format.
True.
In a lot of the other games we play. Most of what we play is cooperative.
Correct.
So that's really fun to see them take what I would call a risk.
Yeah.
Right? This either goes off really well or really poorly, in my estimation, and I think they pulled it off really well. But the other aspect that I really like is, in a lot of games, the narrative is driving the urgency
Correct.
of what is happening here. And you have to use some of your imagination and dispel a little bit of belief in order to get into that mind frame. In competitive games, the urgency is 100% real.
Yeah.
Because either time or quickness or ability matters, because winning is an urgent thing. It's not a passive thing. And it was really interesting to see that to come into place. And as we're going to talk about here in a minute, the format and the gameplay really built on that really well.
Yeah, I think it was hilarious at times that the narrative fed it really well. Because there'd be a point where, like, let's say I won a puzzle or Jared did. We would solve it and they'd give you a narrative bit to explain where you're going next or what's happening with your crew. And nothing was more hilarious than being like, okay, well, I did this. And then it goes, well, actually, right behind you shows up your competitor. And you're like, oh, crap, now we got to run again. You know, there was never, it felt like at all times the urgency was so real and that the game kept up with that pace.
Yes.
You never felt like there was a clear, like, someone leading. It was always the game put it back in perspective that, like, any second you could screw up and your opponent could get ahead.
Absolutely. And let's talk about why that is, because I want everybody to thoroughly understand what the format of this game is. The way that this game works, it is 2 teams, no more, no less. You can have any number of players on the team. 2 to 6 is what the box recommends. And what you are doing is each team is receiving the same puzzle, but with a different answer. So red team and blue team, we actually do a similar format type of game at Murfreesboro Escape Rooms where the puzzles are identical, but the outcomes are different. So there's no cheating. You still might be able to give something away. And then I believe we counted up 12 puzzles in this game that you are competing for. And the way that it works is the first team, in essence, to buzz in and say, I have the right answer, gets to check the answer. If they get the right answer, there are a undisclosed amount of coins that they win.
Yes.
Every time. And you're supposed to keep that hidden until the end of the game. If you look at the puzzle and say, hey, my team got it right, great, you keep those coins. If you buzzed in first and got it wrong, it's almost kind of like Family Feud at the end where points are going to go to the other team. So you're really trying to strike a balance in this game of like, are you sure you have it? Because one of the very interesting points about this game is there are 0 hints. And I like that because that, in my opinion, takes away from the fairness of a competitive game. All of the other Deckscape games have a hint system. This one does not. But as you're going through, you go through all 12 puzzles. At the end of the game, each team is going to have a certain number of undisclosed coins. You flip them all over at the end. The team with the most coins is going to win. And the coin amount, I will say, is widely varying.
Yes.
And that just added so much because early on in the game, I was winning. I had more cards. And then the late game is where Zach really turned it on. And by the end, we had about the same amount of cards, pretty close. Zach may have had one more before the final puzzle. But there was always the question of, do they have more coins under? That
was a blast when we would look at each other. We'd both get our coins from when we would win a puzzle, and then we'd both go, that's an interesting amount of coin. Yes, I'm excited that I have this amount.
And it is. There's a lot of mind gaming because do you try to amp yourself up to make them try to answer a question early?
Yep.
Because we charted our way at the end of the game, and by the end of the game, Zach and I had each correctly answered 4 of the 12 puzzles for a total of 8. And then we had each given the other person 2 puzzles on misses.
Yep.
But the game was so close that it actually came down to the final thing. I shot my shot. I have no regrets. I went for it, and I missed. And that is what cost me the game.
Yep.
But I want to dive in a little bit more to the gameplay because I said we're talking about format and gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
What was so fun about this game was they didn't stick to a rigid puzzle escape room format.
Yeah.
We saw such a broad range. We saw escape room style puzzles. We saw, I would call them odes to board games that we're all very familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
And then parts of it even felt like a game show.
Yeah, the game show aspect was one of my favorite parts of the game.
It was, and that made it fun because one format you could do it well, but it was variety is the spice of life.
Yep.
That played so well in this game. And what I like about that is I feel like it invites non-super puzzly people in to enjoy this,
Yeah.
or younger people in to enjoy this. Like this too, I feel like would be a very great game to hand to anyone because if you are super puzzly like Zach and I are, you might whip through some of the puzzles, but then some of the decision-making games might become a little more complex. And I would say there's even one puzzle that stuck out to me that had us stumped for a good little bit.
Yeah.
And it was through and through, like, again, the format with the gameplay were just this really great marriage. And then wrapping it up in a pirate versus pirate theme.
Yep.
It was just great. It was just so well done.
Mm-hmm.
So, Zach, wrap us up. What else did we really enjoy about this game?
The cleverness. I think the cleverness of the style of the game in terms of like theming, but then also the puzzles themselves. The variety of puzzles like we talked about in terms of the format of it being like game show versus escape room versus board game was just well done. And in terms of like it was clever, but also like the masking of the puzzles inside the format felt authentic. It didn't feel like at any point I was doing something that's like widely like off base of what I would be doing in the scenario. Like the narrative fed into it to where it made sense of like, okay, we're doing this, now we're doing this.
Sure.
You know, we're on our boat and oh no, a kraken attacks, you know, and then we get off the thing and we're both now on our own little rowboats. And now, you know, there were so many times that we do a puzzle and I was like, okay, that's pretty smart. Like, because the other part, which we've probably talked about a little bit, is these are cards. It's not like it's not like the items they give you are huge and have lots of space to work with. It is a small playing card, a little bit bigger than a playing card sized.
A little bit bigger, yes.
Yeah. And being able to put these very solid puzzles in that tiny space is admirable at times. And there were some that you know, one of the things that Deckscape does, because we've played another one, we played Heist in Venice.
Yes.
Is that some of them, you know, you use multiple cards. Like you get to like build like a format. So they give you like 4 cards and it builds a map. And those are well done. Like they fit well together. They look good. The puzzle makes sense. And there was never a point. I think like I said, we had one puzzle that like stumped us for a little bit, but every puzzle, even if it was like super easy or more difficult, we were like, that was solid.
Yeah, it was clever.
It was fun. Like there was never a point that I ever questioned what we were doing. And that's like a great part of a game is when I don't feel like my immersion and how well the puzzles are, the game or anything like that drops.
Yes, I agree. And we'll talk a little bit more about competition and immersion in our next sector.
Oh, geez.
Got some interesting questions lined up. But our overall synopsis of this game is pick it up and play it.
Yes.
If competition really isn't your thing, it's just fun. Mm-hmm. It was just really well done. It flowed very well. There was a lot of diversity, a lot of variety. And again, I think it is a format, and I mean competition style, that I hope to see more of.
Yeah.
Because it is fun. Like for everything that Zach and I do together, it is cooperative, right? We're working together. We have one goal in mind. So it's fun from time to time to take the puzzly world that we love and challenge each other. I think you will love this game. And for the price point of, I believe it's what, $15
I believe
US?
so,
Yeah. I think it's around €11. Pick this up and have a fun hour.
Yeah.
With the people that you usually puzzle with. You will get to talk about so much after the game, and the smack talk is just so worth it. I've been on the receiving end of it, decidedly so. I am the loser, but regardless, it has been a lot of fun to have that back and forth versus like, oh yeah, we beat that puzzle game. And we did have a lot of fun, but I do want to move us into talking about where we felt like there was some room for improvements.
Yeah.
And these are going to be a little bit different today. I don't have any major gripes
No.
with this game. I thought it was a very tight package. It was very well done. The only issue that I have is the final puzzle. And this has the potential to come off super salty, but
He's so mad.
But I have talked to Zach, and he has assured me that he will back me up on this.
Oh, does he know?
Maybe not. Maybe he's about to throw me under the bus. I felt like on the last puzzle, there was, in my opinion, a little room for interpretation that could very easily lead people to the wrong answer. And that is for our pirate metaphor, that is the boat I set sail on. We got into the puzzle. I chimed in first. I felt like my rationale was very on point. It was not what the game was looking for. There was signposting there to say otherwise, but I still feel like it's something that is a little bit of a red herring and potentially misleading at a very important part of the game. Agree?
Yeah, I mean, I mainly can agree. You know, when we played it, we did the final puzzle, we got to it, and it gives you instructions on what you're supposed to do. And we're like, okay, well, I don't want to spoil much of it. I'm just going to say that it tells you should do it's time to be a real pirate.
Yes, do what a real pirate would know
to do in this
blank,
scenario. Yeah,
yes.
blank. And there's a bunch of, you end up on a bunch of islands trying to find treasure, but you have to figure out which island. And you have no clues other than the quote to you and something that we didn't notice at first.
Yes.
So
which was the hint.
Correct.
Yes.
There is something clearly on there that tells you how you're supposed to solve it. So we did it. He tried it that way. I agreed with him. It made sense without knowing the hint or knowing like how you're supposed to truly solve it. And then we flipped it and realized. Now going back at it, Jared can also agree that it makes sense. The final puzzle makes sense when we realize what you were trying to do. The issue is that with how the game's rules work and how you get to the end, you would not think to do what the game wants you to do at the end. And how I'll explain it without trying to like give away the ending is that there are rules that clarify how you and the other crew are supposed to interact with each other.
Correct. And you read those at the beginning of the game.
You read them at the beginning of the game, and there's basically the rule is respect. It's like you are competing, but there is a rule of respect between the pirates. And there's kind of rules explaining how like who reads, like there's things that kind of clarify that. Now, when you get to the end,
right? Because if I throw up a parlay,
yeah,
I feel like the captains should meet. And
correct.
We should have a parlay.
Yes.
And that's pirate code, and that should be respected.
Yes.
Yes.
But there's specifically the hint at the very end tells you to do something that the game, at least from our point of view, thought would never make us do. And so when we get to that and that happened, we were like, okay, it makes sense. Like when I think of pirates and I think of this hint, it does all conclude correctly.
Yes. The puzzle is not wrong. It's not a...
It's just the issue, I think, that the game sets up a certain way of playing it. Your expectation of how the end would go is not how the game ends.
Yes.
Like, it just clearly goes, okay, you've learned how to play this way the entire game. Now we want you to do this. And you go, I never thought I would need to do that. Like, there's never a point that I felt like this element would play into the game.
Yes.
But like I said, it makes sense. When we realize that's what you're supposed to do, it works. But I think it's just going to be hard to get. I think it's hard realistically to get people to think that way when they get to the final puzzle.
Well, it's I'll call it a risky mechanic.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. I think they were trying to find a really creative, unique way to end the game.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, in my opinion, just a little too far of a reach to properly end the game. And along with what I'm saying about like my interpretation of why I thought was right, I'll say this. When we had Errol on the show, Errol always said he's always trying to work out a puzzle that only has one answer, right? And I felt like in that situation, I can't believe I'm the only person that is ever going to like use the train of logic I used to come to the conclusion I came to.
Yeah.
And so it's the combination of those two things that made the final puzzle a little troublesome. Mm-hmm. And in a situation like Zach and I were in, where it's coming down to the last card, to the last puzzle, it took a little wind out of our sails, if you'll go on that. But I don't want to say that the puzzle that was there was bad. It's a working fine puzzle, but the dynamics coupled with what felt like a little bit of a red herring deflated us a little bit at the end.
I think also the only other thing we could say, like something we just didn't do at the time, is I think the hint that it gives you, we just didn't look at.
The signposting.
The signposting that tells you how you're supposed to solve the puzzle, we just didn't look at.
Right, and that's in the heat of the competition.
Yeah.
Yes.
But also it's a thing that how that meta puzzle works into the entire game and how it's like placed is how I'm going to word it without trying to give it away. It makes sense, but I think I just forgot about it almost entirely until that came up and we realized that's how you're supposed to solve it. I think it's just a little too far out of reach. Like just a little bit. Like I think there are people who will get that, but just I think how we personally played the game, I would have never expected to do that ending.
Yes. The next two things that we want to talk about really aren't criticisms of our game, really just our recommendations for how you should play the game based on our experience. We played it 1v1. DV Games recommends that you can play this with 2 to 6. So obviously your other options are 2v2, 3v3 if you're splitting teams equally. We felt like you need to know that there are some advantages that can happen if you don't play the game a certain way.
Yes.
So the way that every puzzle happens is there's a card that has to be read off of. And what Zach and I would do is take turns reading it out loud, put it down, and then the puzzle would quote unquote start. And I think there is an inherent advantage for the person reading the card instead of the person listening to the card. So when you play this game, what we recommend is just have somebody put the card down, let people read at their own speed, and let the puzzle start as soon as somebody puts that card down. Because it felt like I had an advantage when I was reading it because my mind was already running as I'm reading it. And it is just harder to, I think, soak in information listening versus reading.
Agreed.
So that was just a recommendation that we had when you play the game. Put the instruction card down, let that be the beginning of the puzzle, let people read it, and then kind of go from there.
One of the other things is I think Deckscape does well, which we just don't do, especially if you're playing 1v1. I think it's just going to be hard to have this. One of the things they recommend in their general settings of the games is having a neutral, non-playing party, like set up the deck. And that's in Heist and Venice. That's also in this game.
Yeah, that's in all of their games.
That's in all their games. I think actually having a ref for one of these games would be hilarious because I would love to be the ref because I know how the game works and it would be awesome to try to like get them both set up where it felt. Yeah, you could set it up better for him. But yeah, I think it's just the way that Jared explained it would be best if you want to try to make it as equal as possible.
Yes, yeah, totally agree. But that's just so that when you play this game, because you should play this game, pick it up. I feel like that's just going to help neutralize a lot of the like, oh, well, you picked up the card and read it and then you knew the answer right. Like you want to just equal fair playing field as much as possible.
Sure.
And in our experience, we felt like when we were talking about the game afterwards, it was like, yeah, I felt like I did have a little bit of advantage when I read it. And Zach was like, yeah, I probably had a little bit of advantage when I read it.
Yeah.
So just throwing that out there. But Zach, what was our last recommendation for playing the game?
I would say, so in the box, it says it's recommended 2 to 6. I honestly think if you want my opinion, I think you should only do either 1v1 or 2v2. The reason why I say that is because of the space that the cards work on. It's not a lot, and there's not like a lot of crazy puzzles that require multiple thoughts looking into it.
Yes.
Or like multiple brains working at the same time. There's like 1 or 2 puzzles that are difficult that having more than one person would be great. But I think with 3 people, you just wouldn't have enough stuff to do. It would kind of feel like it'd just be someone like 1 or 2 people would feel like they're not doing much, especially in some of the puzzles earlier on in the game.
Agreed.
They're more simple and kind of just like, like me and Jared felt like it was a good fit for us too. But we also have a lot of experience. I think if you are a group that has never played a lot of these, then I think playing 3v3 might be okay because at least it'd feel more like all 3 could have more involvement trying to solve it.
Sure.
But I think if you're more experienced or in the intermediate level, I think playing with less will be better.
And the other thing about it is it's just not a lot, like Zach said, it's not a lot to look at. So if you have more than a 2v2, I just think inevitably one player on each team is just going to be frustrated because they're not getting enough time with the puzzle material.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like we said, the final puzzle is really the only thing that really had qualms with in this game. Overall, this was so much fun.
Yes.
And for those, I believe this game is available now in Europe, but for those of you in the US, it should be coming to Amazon soon.
Yeah, I believe so.
Because this is a new month and we are reviewing a new game in our new game spotlight. But overall, this is an easy pickup for me. It's not very expensive.
Nope.
It will be something that you can talk about for a while And I'm sure down the road I'll be hearing from Zach how he won this round of our competitive game.
I can't wait to play more. If it's from Deckscape or whoever who makes more competitive games, I am so down for
I'm
it.
in. Because, interesting point before we head into our next segment, we're seeing a lot of people do a lot of cool things with format right now. Wild Optimist, their new game is coming out where it's 3 different games, and then you got to, so it's a really cool time for format in our space because the traditional just co-op story is great. It's the bread and butter of what we love. But I'm so excited that people are taking risks and opportunities to do different things.
Yes.
And this is the first truly competitive game that we've seen in the space.
Yeah, that we've played personally.
Right, that we've played personally. So I hope you pick it up. I hope you enjoy it. And we're going to take a break and head into Puzzles to the People. We'll see you in a sec.
Solve puzzles, write reviews, win prizes. It's time for Puzzles to the People.
Jared, I found this really cool box outside. Can we please, can we open it?
Are you out of your mind? Look what it says on the box. It literally reads, root of all evil. There's no way we're opening this box.
Oh, come on, Jared. What's the worst that can happen?
What's the worst? Have you ever seen a horror movie? Listen, you don't split up your team. The basement is not a good hiding place. You don't give cute little creatures water. And above all, you don't open the mysterious and creepy box with the word evil on it.
Please, Jared.
No! But if you're listening and you have more guts than me, you should actually head over to crackanutmysteries.com and pick up a copy of Root of All Evil.
Jared? I think I need to tell you something.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Puzzling Company. We are now in the section that we call Puzzles to the People, where we either look at some feedback or just talk about issues that pertain directly to the games. And that's where we're going to land out today. And as you probably could have guessed, we are talking about competition in our at-home puzzle and mystery world. Because, Zach, we don't see it very often.
No.
So it's fun to talk about that. But let's talk about this. Mind you, we've had one game to play, but we've also played quite a few of competitive escape rooms. So I think that can frame a little bit of our discussion as well.
And board games. I mean, there's other adjacent spaces that we've played competitively. Yeah.
But this first question is directed to the genre of games that we cover directly.
Okay.
What does competition add to our genre?
Ooh, okay.
What did that add to our experience?
I think a sense of urgency, if that's in terms of time or what your objective is. And I think what else it can add is like a breath of fresh air. And so what I mean by that is, you know, we've discussed it before in other talks or earlier today, is that games like this give a new breath of fresh air because it feels like we have a bread and butter to how most games operate, that it's cooperative, and giving people a chance to play competitively and try a new aspect of a game, but also being able to challenge yourself but others that you enjoy playing with is fun. I think the sense of urgency immediately plays in because I think the hard part in some games is that the immersion of the narrative is hard to make you feel like you're doing it fast or that time is of the essence. You know, we've played a few games where the narrative really carries that, where you do feel like there's urgency. I think, as an example, because I love this game a lot, Society of Curiosities, Maddox Lost Treasure, is I think the narrative hard carries the sense of urgency in that game, like the way that they're able to do it. So that's really cool. But I think in some other games that we've played or other people have played, it's harder for me to like stay immersed and be like, okay, I have to do this like ASAP. You know, there's not like a sense of urgency in me needing to complete this as quickly as possible.
Right.
With the competition aspect, like when we played Deckscape's Crew versus Crew, is every time there was a new puzzle, I felt like it was a rush between me and you.
Yes.
That was fun. It made me think quicker. It made me think harder. Because I think sometimes when we play other games, I think just as I have to think just as much. But the thing is, I have more time to think about it over time. And I think time of the urgency and solving it quicker was interesting for us because it was fun watching our brains tick faster than normal trying to solve puzzles.
Yes.
Or the funniness of being like, I'm not positive, but I really don't want you to answer it. So do I almost take the risk and just try to see if I'm correct?
Yes.
That was really fun for this space.
I'm going to use one of our buzzwords. I thought it brought a level of immersion, and I think it's different
Yeah.
than a lot of other games, but competition is one of the most immersive things out there.
Agreed.
For those people that are willing to engage in competition in kind of its purest form, because in immersion, you lose sight of reality, right? And during competitive games, everything else kind of peels away from me. And we've got one mission, whether you and I are in a team or like we were against each other, and it was like, beat blank, beat Zach, beat the other team,
Which you didn't.
which I did not. But you get lost in that,
It's
right?
true.
Which is what we enjoy about games, is that we get lost. So I think competitive games in our genre can add a different sense of immersion, right?
Agreed.
It's not immersion via narrative, via environment, via puzzling per se. It is the raw fact that everything else is being blotted out because I so desperately want to win this game.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say this, generally, I don't know how the rest of you puzzle. Zach and I do our best to put our phones away regardless of what game we are playing. We try to have them off the table, out of sight. But usually on a longer game, life is happening. I have kids at home. Something creeps in where we're like, okay, we'll take a break, yada, yada. My house could have been burning to the ground during crew versus crew.
I hope not.
And I wouldn't have known because I was locked in and I wasn't going to put anything else in the way of trying to beat you at that game.
I don't think we ever looked at the clock. I think we literally looked at the clock when we finished the game because I don't think there was any moment in the game that we decided not to stop playing.
Yes.
Like, and I don't mean that like we would stop playing in other games, but I meant like there was nothing that was going to take our eyes off of the puzzles that we were trying to solve and as
Yes.
quickly as possible.
I agree. And I think that's why it kind of had that I mentioned that game show feel to it. Is a lot of other competitive board games that you play. We played last night. You were over. We were playing a new game called Parks.
Yep.
That is not fast paced enough to consistently hold our attention.
Agreed.
But because it's in this genre, this puzzle solving immediacy that had to happen because you had to be the first one to buzz in.
Yep.
I just really liked that about this style of game.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I thought that was really cool. Now I want to flip it on you.
Okay.
What do competitive games, what do we lose? What does it take away from what we're used to?
Ooh. I think what you can lose in competitive games is aspects of other games that and what I mean by that is like narrative or puzzles and stuff like that. So what I mean by that is that I think in games like crew versus crew or any other competitive type of game is that if the competition or the competitive part is really well done, you can almost like move on or like hide some of the other things. Like narrative was like well done in crew versus crew, but like if even without the narrative being as good as it was, we probably would have still not even noticed it.
Sure.
And I don't mean that like in a bad way. I just mean like we enjoyed it so much that we didn't even like question any part of it. I think you can lose that in other games, like some of the other games we've played that are more co-op. I think you lose out on the big like overarching narrative. You lose out on story, but you gain a different aspect of immersion, like that we discussed earlier. Outside that, I don't really have like a pure answer of what you think. I think you truly lose.
I agree with you on the narrative aspect. Like, it is nice that everything stays on theme and on point because that is always an immersion breaker.
Mm-hmm.
When you're playing a pirate game and all of a sudden there's a modern safe, you're like,
that's weird.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
So stuff like that is always jarring. But honestly, this could have been pirates. It could have been Wild West. Like, it doesn't matter to me so much what theme is surrounding the competition because, like I said, I'm so lost in it. I have no idea what the story is.
Yeah.
And even in some of the other competition games that you and I have played in and escape games, I could maybe tell you what they were broadly about. Like
Yeah.
we've actually played a real life pirate
Oh, we did. Yeah.
competitive escape room, which
did.
is really funny.
We were on the same team.
We,
together when
we
played that
were
one.
we were on the same team.
But
in that one.
who was it? Abby, and Jake. You all got destroyed. That's all you have to know.
Yeah, I can say get wrecked for once on this episode. But it is just very interesting how other things that are just staples that we care so much about, they get lower ranked in my book when there's competition on the line.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people lose that, and rightfully should, because that kind of takes the focus. It's like story. No, I don't have time for that. It's like if you try to show me a video of something or build the narrative in a competitive escape game, I'm mad because you're wasting my time. The other team probably isn't watching the video either, and you should be over there working on that puzzle instead of watching the screen, which I guarantee you has no puzzle content in it.
Yep.
So I agree. I think the narrative and sometimes the quality of puzzle can suffer in a competitive scenario just because we can deal with blah, 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 blah after the game. We got to go.
But I also think that really good competitive games aren't the most puzzle heavy. And what I mean by that is that they are less difficult so that you have more enjoyment in them. And that time is less like, there are obviously some competition games where the puzzles are very difficult, but the game is over a longer period of time.
Sure.
I think in an hour, you can't put like 12 very difficult puzzles back to back to back.
I agree.
I think you would not have as much fun. I think having the good level of like easier puzzles to get to more difficult, to having like one, I think in this game we had like one puzzle that we thought was like quite difficult in terms of like it took us time, but the other ones were still like difficult, but we just figured them out pretty quickly.
Sure.
I thought that was fun because, like I said, there's never a point where I felt like it was so stressful and me trying to win that I didn't have fun.
Right.
And I think in good competition games, it's never that difficult because then if both teams are struggling so hard, then it's not fun. We've seen that in other like competition, like escape rooms and stuff, where if you both aren't doing well, and I think we didn't say this about this game. One of the things I really like about this game as well is it does offer a version that if you both don't know how to answer it, you can just both not take any point and figure it out together.
Yes.
So there's like a neutral way of being like, okay, we have a truce that we both can't figure this out. And that's how you're able to solve it without someone winning or losing.
But as we discovered, there are no truces with pirates.
True. But it was interesting. Like, I think the level of difficulty that was in specifically crew versus crew was perfect for a competition game. And I think in other competition games that we have played in terms of like other adjacent spaces, that has been key. Like not making it crazy difficult where you can have a good time, but giving you still an aspect that you have to work for it.
Yes. I want to talk now about the format. We mentioned this earlier in what we liked, but the format of this game is you had a puzzle, I had a puzzle. The puzzles followed the same process, but you arrived to different answers.
Yes.
What format do you like better? And spoiler, Silvano's going to talk a little bit about this in his interview, but they made a very conscious decision to not go for a game that was, you have a copy of the game, I have an identical copy of the game, and let's see who can solve it first, right? Mm-hmm. So which format do you like better and why? Did you like what they did here with that style, or would you have preferred for me to have a full set of a material, you have a full set of the material, and it's purely just a sprint to the end?
Sure. I think it depends on the game, but let's talk about Deckscape's crew versus crew first. I would say for crew versus crew, I think the format they picked was actually perfect. I think it felt like we both had to work at the same time. And I can understand how someone could be disappointed by that because they want to work at their own pace and not like wait on the other person. But I think that's almost a game show aspect of itself, that there was never a point where it felt like one of us could get a crazy lead on the other person.
Exactly.
Because I think that's the difference is like if I could play by myself and I was able to solve puzzles quicker, I could just jump to puzzle 6 quicker than Jared ever could, in the scenario, correct? But then, like someone else is just behind the rest of the game. I think the fun part with having only one deck is that you are forced to stay with your opponent the entire time. So it never felt like you could have crazy lead, and it kept it always fair in terms of timing. It never felt like if someone got a crazy lead, they just won.
Right.
Because that's the one thing I was worried about in this game is that if, let's say, it was a game that Jared did way better than me, that he would just start snowballing ahead. But even at times where I lost puzzles or he lost, we had a good time to recollect and talk about the puzzle because it lets you do that and talk about how it was correct or not. And then we both were able to talk about it a little bit and then move on to the next puzzle together. I think that was perfect. I think for this game specifically, I think doing the other way would do a disservice to how fun the game could be.
Yeah, I agree, but I'll push back a little bit.
Okay.
Because I'm really trying to drive into let's combine the formats. Let's say we weren't allowed to puzzle jump. I'll throw exit games at you.
Sure.
We actually have an episode with them coming up here in a
Yes.
couple episodes. I'm really excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
What if we were playing an exit game and we agreed, hey, we'll do the same format. Buzz in if you have the correct answer for puzzle 1. We'll check it and move forward.
Sorry, you're going back to the question is just if we played the exact same way, but the format was just different in terms of that you had a deck and I had a deck.
Right. Is that
better or different?
Is that better, more engaging to you, or is your preference what we saw in Crew and Crew?
I think my preference is still crew versus crew. I could see how people would like that, being able to have like your own deck, so you could like be able to interact with the cards as much as you want and not have to worry about the other person. Because I could see how that could be bothering if like, especially the card they need to read. Like if like let's say like when I was reading it, I held it more to my side longer, like we talked about, or if you had it more, it could be frustrating to the other person. But I think having your own set of cards would be fine. I just don't think it would. I think crew versus crew format was better in my personal preference.
And I think that's fair because it really is unique that you both get to work on the same puzzle, but you're not. The big factor for me is you're not giving away something, right?
Yeah.
If you yell out your answer, that's completely meaningless to me. What matters is now if you start telling me about the process, then we have, something to work on.
Sure.
So I really like that format because you could take any old game the other way, reset it, let the other person play it, do a time trial, and come out that way. So I think the decisions that they made were really intelligent, and it turned out to just be a really cool experience for both of us.
I think the other part I want to bring up as well is I think the other factor that would affect is potentially price and the packaging. Because let's say you wanted to keep it the same that they provided both decks. They're now doing double. They're making the price almost double. They have to have a bigger box. The game format potentially changes because of how much more space. Or you have to buy them separately. Like we both have to buy. Now you spend $30 on this game USD instead of $15. And I think, I mean, people want that. That's what they want, right? But I'm just saying specifically for crew versus cruise format, I think it works very well. I think the other way wouldn't work as well, but understandable.
Yes, I agree. All around wise, tightly packaged game that we got to play.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want to spend too much time in this section because we're really excited to get to interview one of the two creators of this game. And he's coming at you now live in Questions for Creators. We'll be right back.
There are some awesome people who make the puzzles we love to solve. This is Questions for Creators.
Zach, you never responded to my email about the rally next week.
The rally?
Yeah, dude, they're trying to tear down the old tree off of Maine. That's a bat-coon habitat.
I think you mean raccoon.
Zach, next thing you know, you'll be calling swargators alligators.
Swargators? Bat-coons? Jared, what are you talking about?
Dude, everyone knows that the American Society for the Protection of Magical Creatures spends countless hours trying to preserve the habitat of these magical and magnificent creatures. Do you want your kids growing up in a world where there's no lobgwins?
Do I?
Well, that's a fair question. Lobgwins are actually very temperamental creatures, but sometimes I can do without them. But what everyone should do is head over to theaspmc.org, that's theaspmc.org, and sign up to help their investigations. Only you can prevent the extinction of these magical creatures.
Well, welcome back, guys. We are now in the section that is Questions for Creators. Dun-dun-dun. This is just a part of the episode where we get to talk to the amazing people or a person who create the games that we enjoy to play, and especially the one that we played today, which was Deckscape's Crew versus Crew. We have someone on that we like talking to a lot, don't we?
We do. Very excited to have him on today. And just a reminder, he's only half of the equation.
Correct.
We'll get to meet his partner in crime, Martino, in hopefully what is an upcoming episode where we get to play the rest of the Deckscape series. and then provide our loving audience with a ranking list
Oh,
of how we enjoyed them, apart from Crew versus Crew.
sure.
The other, I believe they have 7 other games out right now in the
I
Deckscape.
think so.
Yes. So that's coming in the future, but want to jump right in. Let's meet our great guest today.
So tell us your name and about your puzzly past.
Hi, I'm Silvano Sorrentino from Italy, from Bari, a town in Apulia, in the south of Italy. And I've been working as a puzzle designer and as a game designer since 1999, I guess. I started working as a game designer when an Italian magazine about board games arrived in shops in Italy at the end of last millennium. Don't remember the exact date. It was called Giocaria, and it contained reviews of the latest games in the best period for the golden age of board games, I guess. So something like starting from Settlers of Catan, when it was still called Settlers of Catan. It's just Catan now. So imagine how old I am. And they also published some games. You will call those print and play now. So you have to cut and play the games from the magazine. And since I love the style of the magazine, it was very new to me because I just started knowing modern board games. I wrote them and asked if I could participate in the magazine. So I started writing some articles, and my first published board games is a little abstract two-player games called Mind Ball, where you control a ball in a sort of a mind soccer game, trying to put a ball in the other player's goal. It's not a masterpiece with my eyes from now, but it worked. And I start knowing people from the magazine, then became a part of DV Games, which is the publisher that I work for now, and also publishes my Deckscape and Detective series of games. But I'm jumping ahead because between the two things, the magazine and the current games, I also started working as a puzzle designer for several other magazines. For example, I wrote for a year detective comics. I don't know how you call them. Those puzzles with one page with a little murder mystery or detective story in form of comics, and you have to find the solution. So I wrote one of these each week with the aid of a comic book writer, published illustrator. And then I start getting more jobs in the same area by creating riddles and puzzles and games for all sorts of magazines. And since I always like to put myself in the corner and try to create something new, I always try to create my own games and write something that is original. Also because at these times it's much easier to sell something original instead of another 20 pages of Sudokus and crosswords and other stuff other authors do. So I found my way there. And since I had this career as a puzzle designer, I also started working as a board game designer with DV Games. In 20 years ago, I published one of the first games in the DV Games line, which was called Ostragon, a little party game when you make up your questions, etc. And this started my career also as a board game designer. I started publishing games with other small publishers at first, like Adlung Spiele, etc. Then the big hits came with the latest game from DV Games, so Deckscape and Detective.
So Silvano, tell us how you came up with the concept for Deckscape.
We started playing brick and mortar escape rooms. Also here in Italy, they were a big hit like 7 or 8 years ago, the first ones. And then came the first two boxed escape rooms, tabletop escape rooms I know, which are the Think Fun games from Blue Metal Games. And one game I only knew, but I haven't tried yet at the time, the Werewolf Experiment, who then was republished by Mattel, and in the end I was able to get one copy to try. And of course, I was also a big lover of video games like Professor Layton and every other kind of game with a lot of puzzles in it. And I realized that there were already those big box escape rooms on the market, but there was space for something very small, like an escape room card game. So the idea behind the Deckscape series of games is to create some pocket escape rooms, only analogic. You don't need anything to play, only the cards, which are one shot, and but not you do not distract the game while you play. So you can then reset and reboot the game and give it to your friend to try. And at the time, the concept was pretty new. So me and Martino Chiacchiera, my co-author, start working on it, actually as a byproduct of another kind of game we started writing at the start, because the story of Deckscape and Detective is intertwined, as we started creating a detective game first, and it was the basis for the current Detective. But it had something that was not working very well years ago. So we took something from that game and created an escape room on parts of the original mechanics of that game. Because, there is some similarities between detective and escape room games, being in both cases game when you gain information and try to solve puzzles, even if they are different in the end. So we were able to create something using those original mechanics. And the main idea of the Deckscape series is that in the games we have tried, both video games and those tabletop games I mentioned, I really hated the fact that you can get stuck at some point. And you need to use the hints, and if you don't understand the hints, you need to read the solution and go on, and you feel dirty for doing that, because but being stuck it's very bad. So we wanted to create a mechanic that does not get you stuck, and so to rise the party game element of the game, because at Jockey DV Games, most of our successes are in party game or casual game line of games. And so we came up after a while with this idea of having just some questions of one side of the card and the answer on the other side of the card. This is it. This is the checking mechanic of Deckscape. So the idea is you need to have some puzzles that look difficult until you find the solution and you have the haha moment when you know you have the right solution and everything clicks. And so it's like you auto correct yourself. You already know the solution is right when you see the solution, usually when we have done our work well. So you do not have any code wheel, any app, any other gimmick to check the solution, which is, of course, both a pro and con of all other games. And this gives us a lot of freedom. In the first game of the line, which is Test Time, we used as a basis the most common escape room mechanics, meaning the story was just a way to go forward, and sometimes the puzzle was not very very well put into the story. This is something that happens, for example, in the Professor Layton games I mentioned before. And this is of course, because when you write the first game of a series, you are writing several things at the same time. You are writing both the interface, the mechanics, the story, etc. It's quite a hard job to do. So we took months to come up with the first game. But then we realized we have this freedom in our hands, and we were able to create much better games starting from the second one. I'm not saying the first one is better if everyone wants to try the first one, but it's not my favorite. And I think we have we are now at a very good point here, because we are able to create stories that are intertwined with the puzzles, and puzzles that advance the story as you play. So there is very few text actually in the Deckscape game compared to other games in this area, because part of the text of the story is part of the puzzles. There are very few cards that are only story. You advance in the story with the puzzle is solved. And this is how Deckscape was born. These were the main ideas, to have a simple puzzle with the solutions on the back, and to use the cards itself as objects you can gain and you can combine in different ways, often using the physical properties of the card itself, throwing cards, looking at the cards in the light, etc. Whatever we can do with a simple card, it's a puzzle in itself to create those games. This is why it's fun for me to do.
So, Silvano, we know you have another series out that's called Deck Detective. What are the differences between that and Deckscape?
Oh, those are very different games, actually, because Deckscape is what you think will be if you think of a pocket escape room. So you have those pile of cards that represent different parts of the room you are in. You want to escape. It can be a room, it can be a place, depends on the adventure. It can be something bigger. And the card on the top of each deck is what you are currently seeing. So, for example, you see a card that is a closed box, and you don't have the key to open it. And you see another card where there is a character. You can talk with this character, and he gives you some information, etc. And in the end, you will get the key from that other deck, and you can come back to the other deck of cards and open the box with a key. And of course, since you don't have a checking mechanism, you have to think if you are able to open the box. So probably the box will say, you need something to open this box. And if you come with a blue key to open a blue box, you try to open it. And in the real, it will say, if you don't have the blue key, just flip this card back and lose 5 minutes in the end, for example. And that was a very bad example because, of course, you're now thinking we have blue boxes and blue keys in the game, but I'm sticking with it right now. The detective games are widely different because, first of all, they start from a fantastic idea. And I can say it's fantastic because it's not mine. It's from Martino, my co-author. So kudos to him. Which is to use the first cards you find in the deck, because this is, again, a simple deck of cards. Use the first cards and slide and put those cards in the box itself to create a 3D view of the crime scene, which can also change during the course of the game. So the first thing you do is looking at the crime scene. It's like a miniature now of a house or of a murder scene. And you can look it from different angles, and it's 3D. And then you start the game, and the game has pretty few rules. Each player starts with some cards in his hand, and in your turn, you can do one of those things. You can play a card if you can pay its cost, or you can discard the card. And when you discard the card, you add it to the zone called the archive. And the number of cards in the archive is like your mana, if you are a Magic player. So you can play a card if you have enough cards in the archive. You do not discard the cards in the archive. So if you have 7 cards in the archive, you can play any card of cost 7 or less from now on. And since all the cards have useful information, and also you do not shuffle the card at the start, so the card come in particular order, so you find more and more relevant information as you go on. You have to decide each time if you want to play a card now, and so you can show what's in the card to everyone, or to have chipped the card to make you pay for later cards. But then you have to remember what the card says because you cannot see it again. And also there are some cards in the deck which are the plot twists. And if you draw a card and you find a plot twist under that card, so the back of the card says, oh, this is a plot twist, you read what it says and different things can happen. The crime scene can change, or something can happen, or a new character appears, anything. And the other interesting mechanic is that each game ends with 5 questions, and you have 7 red clips in the game, and you will answer the questions using those clips. Some question can have multiple responses. For example, who is a murderer? And in some games there can be 2, or can be none, etc. And you put the clips on the side of the card, and then when you turn the card, the clip will say if you are right or not, because on the back of the card there is one lighted box in the point when the clip is, if you are correct, and it says the points. And you can change your answer at any time after you answer the 5 questions, before reading the 5 answers on the back. So maybe you try to give one answer to the first one, but then while you think of the motive later, because another question asks about it, you think, oh, but maybe this does not fit with what I told before, and you can change what you said before.
So talk to us about the challenges of making a competitive game, because we just don't see this format that often, if at all.
That was very tricky, and this is why we have done this, because we have difficult problems to solve. I'm not sure if no competitive escape room games exist, but we know no competitive games in this area, in the tabletop area. So we wanted to be the first, and luckily we succeeded in this. I don't know if anyone is thinking of doing the same now, because it's proving to be very successful. And of course, there are a lot of game design issues to solve if you want to create a competitive game, so 1 versus 1 or team versus team, starting from a cooperative game mechanic. The first problem is, of course, the materials, because first you have like 60 cards to create a story and puzzles, and now you probably have 30 cards each, or you have to find another way to split the puzzles between the 2 teams. We decided to, of course, keep it simple, because this is the idea behind the Deckscapes. So we did a few variations of the same idea, but basically the basic idea is that you provide the same question to the 2 teams, but slightly different puzzles. So we found different ways to create puzzles that are similar but not identical. So you can never just see what the others are doing and copying them. And there is no timer, and the timing mechanism is connected to the player themselves, because as soon as one of the teams says stop, they will check the solution of the puzzle. And if they are right, they win a card with some doubloons. Otherwise, they give the card to the other team. So you are in this position where you want to be quick, but if you are too quick, you can get an answer wrong and give the points to the other team. And to solve the problem that we have fewer cards, so we can put few puzzles in the game, and at the same time to solve the problem that we do not want the game to be too quick, or a team to answer too quickly to a puzzle, because otherwise it will not be fun for the other team. We just created some puzzles that are more difficult, more complex, maybe not difficult, more complex than the usual puzzles we have in the Deckscape. Because usually in the Deckscape you have like 25 to 30 puzzles, which are very quick. We want each puzzle to last no more than 2 minutes, so you can complete a game in about an hour. Here instead we wanted to make some, I say complex, but sometimes they are more complex, sometimes there are multiple steps to solve the same puzzle. So we want each team to think about the puzzle for 6 or 7 minutes, and then come with the solution. And this is fun because it's very tense, because while you're doing this, the other team is doing the same. So you also have another level of complexity, because you want to communicate with your fellow players, but you don't want to give any hint to the other team. Even if the puzzles are different, any idea that you have can help the other team. So it's a little like what's the name of the game? Captain Sonar, the one in the submarine, when you want to communicate but be alert to what you're saying. So it's different layers of complexity at the same time. You are solving a puzzle, you are trying to communicate, you want to be quick, and this makes for a fun game, apparently, because the reviews are pretty great for now for this idea. We wanted to create some moments that are different from the rest of the game, because if you just have two different teams playing their own puzzles, at some point it will sound like, okay, each one is playing its own escape room. Why don't we just play 2 copies of a regular Deckscape and see who got first? And so we have several occasions when we have some mini games inside, which are sort of a logic puzzle when you play in turns. I don't want to spoil anything, but for example, a puzzle when in your turn you choose to look at one card and choose what to do, and then pass to the other players until one of the teams have enough information. Or the first occurrence of this is a sort of logic battleships we have at the start of the game, just to introduce the mini puzzles. So you try to shoot the ship of the other team, and you give the coordinates, and it says how much far is from the ship. And the maps are different, of course, for the reason I told before. So you start to calibrate and get closer and closer to the ship. Final twist that you only can do in a game like this, which I will not spoil, but I hope it will be very, very fun.
So Silvano, we know that you are a big comic book collector and board game collector. How do those two things play into creating your puzzles and your stories?
I love puzzle games before even knowing this, because I remember that the first things I can see as a little kid were, for example, some puzzles from Martin Gardner, or some interesting puzzle-like games I found in some books. Or I love the Rubik's Cube, for example. So for some reasons, those games always clicked with me. But I also like every kind of form of art where you can see the designer has think a lot, but he created something that it does not look very complex. So, for example, I like the comics by Alan Moore, since you talked about comics, or I like the Doctor Who stories from Stephen Moffat. Something that, in the end, it's a product that anyone can enjoy, but has different layers of complexity. And if you are a designer, you understand how much work it's behind those games. And this is something I like about puzzle game, because the best puzzle game is very simple to play, but it's very, very difficult to create. Just think about the Rubik's Cube. If you now see a Rubik's Cube, it looks very easy to make, to create, but it's a very, very, very difficult thing to imagine and create also as a mechanical object. So it's both the fact that I love the artwork between ideas, and also I love when puzzles and stories are intertwined. And this can happen also in movies and in TV series, etc. For example, someone mentioned that one of the first escape rooms you can see in movies is from Indiana Jones and Last Crusade. It's called Indiana Jones 3, when you have 3 trials at the end of the story. I don't know if you have seen the movie. I don't want to spoil for it. But yes, you can see that someone put a lot of thought in those moments, and it's something everyone remembers.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you have coming from the future with DV games or with the Deckscape or Detective series? I'm sure there's things you probably can't talk about, but we're hoping to see more in the future.
Yes, right now, as you can imagine, we need about a year to create any Deckscape. So we are still working on the final details of 2 Deckscapes we have created during the pandemic. Because of course the things also slow down for a bit. One I can say, because it was announced a couple of times, it will be called the Dracula's Castle. And of course it's set in a classic monsters setting. So not only Dracula, but any other classic monster you can think. And the idea is that you will have a little book, which is the Monster Hunter book, and you will use this book also while solving your puzzles. And also, it was the first time we introduced some bigger puzzles, so you use more cards on the table to create a larger board or a larger puzzle. And this will be very, very interesting, because it allows us to create different puzzles than usual. So that was the main idea between this game. Have a little fewer puzzles, but have some big puzzles, which is something we sometimes did just for the final puzzle of each Deckscape until now. Sometimes we used some big puzzles in the end, but this time we have done more times during the game. And then there is another one I cannot say because the DV games lawyers will come and get me if I pronounce anything. But just let me say that, there is, while you try to create puzzles, sometimes you get very crazy ideas and you say, I cannot put this in the game because this is too out of the box and the players will not play it. So we come up with a setting that allows us to put all the crazy ideas from the last 5 years and put everything inside the game. And this will be so out of the box that any puzzle that you can solve with normal logic will sound strange in this context, because everything else will need every ounce of your lateral thinking, or even moments when you say, they cannot really want me to do this, right? And yes, we want you to do that.
So, Silvano, a question we ask everyone: what other games do you play or are you currently playing? And, give us an example of like a comic book or a board game or an escape style game that you were playing.
I am a Marvel fan, and I really like the Vision miniseries by Tom King. I don't know what is the name of the miniseries in America, but it's 2 volumes. And this something that was used as a basis for the WandaVision TV show, but it's pretty different. And it's interesting because it's multi-layered, because it's the story of an android and its family in suburban America. And of course, it's also a story of integration because regular people do not want androids to live there. So it's a very interesting comics, also fantastic illustrations. As for video games, let me think what I played later. I'm a huge Nintendo fan, so usually the answer is the latest big Nintendo game. I played a lot of Luigi's Mansion later. So, it's a Ghostbuster vibe. Also, it looks fantastic as for a Nintendo Switch game. I could not think they can squeeze something like that in such a small console. So I'm loving that. Also, I love the fact that most of Nintendo games have different way of completion. You can just complete the game by going to start to end. But if you are a completist like me, you want to complete again each level by collecting everything. And this is very fun to me. Also because, again, this brings back some puzzle into the game. Because if you want to complete anything, you need to solve some puzzles to understand where the last damn star is, for example. And as a board game, I'm not playing that much right now because we were locked in the last few months. And I just got my vax shot, so I'm waiting for the last 2 weeks to get freedom again. But I played and I love a lot Micro, which is I don't know if you know it. It's a new game which is a very huge map with some comics, the very stylized comics with very violent and murderous things happening at the same time. And you can. And the brilliant idea of the game is that this poster, this map, shows all time at the same time. Meaning, for example, you can see a character walking. You can see the same character entering a car a few blocks later. Then you can see a car going through a wall. And if you follow the character, you can see what it's doing. And it's a deduction game because you have some murder or theft or other very violent things happening in this very nicely looking town. And you have to understand what happened by looking at the characters, how they interact. And it's brilliant. I think it might win the Spiel des Jahres Game of the Year contest because it's nominated. And that was very, very fun to play with my wife during those months.
Silvano, we just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show today. Honored to have you. Thank you so much for your perspective. And if you're out there listening, know that you've got more Silvano time coming. Room Escape Artists just released that we have a session at their Recon conference coming up in August.
Wow.
If you don't have a ticket to that already, you should definitely pick one up. Their basic tier is pay as you want, pay as you will, pay what you can. And then they have a really cool other tiers for as deep as you want to get involved. But David and Lisa, the owners of Room Escape Artists, asked us to host a tabletop panel. Mm-hmm. So we've got a lot of really cool people on that panel. Silvano's one of them. We've got Cracking Up Mysteries. We've got Society of Curiosities. We've got Scarlet Envelope. We've got Blue Matter Games. It is a really, really cool panel. And we're going to be talking about what we all love, which is at-home mystery, tabletop puzzle escape games, and the intricacies of that. And please, please, please come check us out at that conference. You'll get to learn about so many other amazing things and meet so many other amazing people. And the creators, David and Lisa, have done such a fantastic job pulling this off. A little history, it was supposed to be an in-person conference. It was the first year of it last year. For obvious reasons, that didn't happen. For this year, they wanted to play it safe. But I have gone to in-person conferences, digital conferences. This is by far the best digital conference I've ever been to last year. And it's so exciting to get to be a part of it this year. You need to come check it out. If not, just to see us again, right?
I know you guys want to see me.
And with winner Zach and loser Jared.
Yes.
Yes, which I hope doesn't stick. But definitely check out Recon. You can just Google that, search for it, get you whatever level of ticket that you want, and just have a good time meeting other cool enthusiast people in the industry in adjacent spaces. But that's all we have for today. As I mentioned, this game is, as of today, which I believe is June 7th. It is Crew versus Crew is available on the English site of DV Games, but it is not currently available on Amazon, but will shortly become. But you can always, if you're in Europe, you can pick this up on their website, and we recommend that you do. For us, what you can always do for us, shoot us a subscribe, a regular download, or a like on Facebook would be amazing. Helps us do and accomplish what we're trying to do in the future for everybody listening out there. Hit us up at puzzlingcompany.com. We'd love to interact with you on social media, talk about the industry, talk about questions that you may have. Send us a game recommendation if there's something out there that you've loved playing that we should play and talk about on the show. Who knows, we may even have you on the show to talk about it. Spoilers for the future. But I think that's going to wrap us up today. Zach, any last thoughts? Your last option for today to brag on yourself?
I just want to thank myself for the great opportunity of my mind. I want to thank all the time I put into getting smarter. No, the Deckscape Crew versus Crew was great. It was honestly an honor to play against you. It was great fun, to say the least. And I'm very excited for Recon and everything else coming forward.
It's going to be great. I don't want to end this episode without talking about what we have going on next week. Zach, do you know what we have going on next week?
I don't. Can you tell me?
So we are actually going to take it back, way back.
What do you mean going
to
back?
The beginning, Zach?
What do you mean?
What I mean is we are actually, we've been working with Thames and Cosmos here in North America, which are the publishers of the Exit series. And what we are going to do periodically is play all of their episode games in sets of 3 until we have completed every single Exit game. Then we're going to release a ultimate Exit guide review. But we're also, every time that we talk to them, going to be talking to somebody different inside of their team. So usually where we have a creator on, we're not going to have a creator on next week. We are going to have one of their marketers on next week, which I think will be really interesting because it feels like one of the biggest barriers to a lot of our creators is they've got really good stuff, but the dollars in order to get it to a larger crowd can be a barrier. And so I'm excited to talk about this. And also, this also goes with what I've mentioned with Recon coming up. We're going to be launching into talking just beyond creators. We're still going to be talking to creators when we ever can, but we're going to be talking to marketers, distributors, even maybe some of the ownership of some of these people that are a little farther removed from design, just to round out the people and the groups that really put these games on our shelves. So I'm really excited. Next week, we will be playing the very first 3 games in the Exit series, which I believe were launched 16, 17-ish. And Zach, do you know what those are?
No, Jared, I don't. But do you know the names of them?
I do. So the very first 3 games that they came out with in the Exit the Game series were The Secret Lab, The Pharaoh's Tomb, and The Abandoned Cabin. These were award-winning games at the time in 2017. Won some very prestigious awards over in Europe. And the big question I think we'll be talking about is whether these games hold up in 2021. So I'm super excited to take a little time travel back, and we can't wait to spend some time with you next week.
See you guys.
Thanks for listening. Find us on social media at Puzzling Company and online at puzzlingcompany.com. Check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, keep puzzling.